Welcome back. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Civilians are celebrating at Umayyad Square in the capital of Syria, Damascus. They're celebrating the end of the 24-year rule of Syria's president Bashar al-Assad. Assad fled Syria as Islamist rebels swept into Damascus. That's not all. Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces have also removed a statue of Bashar al-Assad's father and his predecessor as President Hafiz al-Assad from the main square of Kamishli. Joining us at this point is Ambassador Bashpati Mukherjee, former diplomat. Ambassador Mukherjee, what do you make of these visuals coming in from Damascus, celebrations erupting at Umayyad Square there? Meanwhile, a statue of Bashar al-Assad's father reportedly also has been brought down.
All I can say is that the report that I'm also getting is that there has been a breakdown of law and order in many parts of Damascus. There are buildings that are being looted. The security forces, many of them have just melted into the crowd, as happens in revolutions. And Syria is not a monolithic Sunni Islam country. The tribe that Bashar al-Assad came from is very strong in one part of the country. The Kurds are very strong in another part of the country. So these celebrations in Damascus may be short-lived, because there are also reports coming in that the Russians have flown in huge fighter planes into the base that they have in Syria. And there are also disturbing reports coming in that there could ultimately be some kind of informal trifurcation of Syria into different zones of influence. So you may have Aleppo and Damascus in the temporary control of these rebels, so-called rebels. But definitely the tribe that Bashar al-Assad comes from, which has ruled Syria for so many years, they will not give up control on their part. And the Kurds want to carve out an independent Kurdistan, which the Turkish-based rebels will not allow, and that will immediately bring the Kurds into conflict with those who are now dancing in Damascus. So, as a seasoned diplomat, Uday, I would say that perhaps this dancing is very short-lived. Syria is going to go through a huge amount of instability and crisis. It could become center of the great power game, and it could trigger off a very major conflict in this part of the world, especially if, as rumors are, the Russians are strengthening their base. They have actually two bases in Syria, so it's not going to be such a simple walk through as some people are claiming. It is easy to walk in. It is difficult to hold on to territory. So we have to watch and wait and see what happens. Uday.
Some more details coming in this hour. Bashar al-Assad's residence in Damascus has been ransacked after rebels seized control of the Syrian capital. Assad's residence is in shambles now, with empty cabinets and books, paintings and other personal belongings scattered across the floors. That's not all. People have taken away the Assad's family's belongings, and several others can be seen posing with smiles and peace signs where Assad once lived. Adit Kothari, founder Indic Society, is joining us live. Adit Kothari, dramatic visuals coming in from Damascus. Assad's residence has been ransacked, belongings have been looted. What do you make of these pictures coming in from the place where the ruler of Syria once lived?
So I think we've seen this, in this just 1 year or maybe 2 years, we've seen this multiple number of times. We saw this happening in Bangladesh, where Sheikh Hasina's prime ministerial palace was basically looted, desecrated, stormed in by the so-called rebels. What is shocking for me is, how little time it took for this sort of the rebels to go on and, create a complete ruckus and engineer a complete takeover. We've seen this in Afghanistan, where things happened in such rapid pace. We've seen this in Afghanistan. We've seen this in Syria now. The kind of regime changes that are happening, at least over the last couple of years, must ring some sort of alarming bells for all of us. And at the heart of it all, I don't think we should harbor any sense of political correctness, is the American deep state. The American deep state needs to be called out, because they are ultimately they are creating Frankensteins. We saw this during the Arab Springs as well. You want to engineer regime changes. You want to say that, we want to propel democracy. We want to encourage liberalism, etc., etc. But who are you actually handing the powers to? Let's not forget the rebels who are 100%, they have been sort of patronized by the American deep state. At the end of the day, who do they represent? They represent the Al Qaedas. They represent, you know, Islamists who have gone and blown off people and beheaded people and driven tanks, on them, while they are alive, etc. So, to see the French president or the American president come out and say, yeah, we've won, and, we are now going to establish a new regime where peace and tranquility is going to be established in Syria, that is all hogwash at the end of the day. Syria is going to be the new chaos, like Ambassador Mukherjee just outlined. And this may well be an sort of a crisis which will not be easy to sort of bottle up in the coming years. Uday.
Okay, let me quickly, in fact, take that across to some more developments as well coming in now. A day after rebels swept into Damascus, crowds have queued up border crossings between Syria and Turkey, as well as crossings between Lebanon and Syria. Syrians have expressed happiness at being able to return to their homeland. Many spoke about how they fled to Turkey when the civil war began 13 years ago. Major General Sudhakarji, defense expert, is joining us live. Major General Sudhakarji, what do you make of these developments coming in from the borders of Syria? Border crossings have suddenly filled up. So many Syrians are now returning after multiple years, in fact, some after almost a decade.
Yeah, Uday, good evening. Thank you, and compliments to the previous very distinguished and esteemed panelists, co-panelists. Very interesting. I have been thinking as to why things are happening the way it is unfolded suddenly, all of a sudden in Syria. So following points, being a military man, they come to my mind. First and foremost thing is there is a historical legacy, as per my understanding, that there is the old baggage which Syria has been carrying for century, more than half a century. And that baggage is the Assad regime, which has been carrying on. It's an autocratic kind of a governance which has denied the basic aspirations and necessities to the people. This is my limited understanding, first point. Second point is that by virtue of the geography of Syria, it becomes a kind of a transit route, a supply chain transit route between Iran up to Hezbollah's, Hamas, primarily these two, I would say. Third and most important thing that comes to my mind is there is a Turkish interest by having triggered this particular offensive. It's in the open media that whatever is happening, the STS has been triggered to go in for the offensive, counter-offensive rather, I would say, all of a sudden, because the following things have come to light. First and foremost thing, Russia and Iran, who are partners or the collaborators of Syria so far, they have been weakened to large an extent, or they're unduly committed in their respective internal issues and the ongoing combat in the conflict in Ukraine. Second thing is that Iran and its proxies have been actually weakened to large an extent. Third is that the supply chain route between Iran up to Hezbollah and the Hamas has been not decimated, but they have been intercepted effectively. They have been blocked very, very effectively. So the men, material, resources, logistic backup, everything is getting somehow or the other blocked en route, and it is not reaching out to the people where it matters. And the next point that comes to my mind is Israel, by all chance, would like to enjoy this particular reprieve. When I say reprieve, what I mean is that Syrian offensive having taken off, they have got a small window of opportunity to go beyond the Golan Heights. Just take your mind back to 74 or 67. They had restricted themselves to a particular line, but I am told the latest input coming from my friends whom I know, they are well into Syria by more than 14 kilometers, deep inside the Syrian territory, and they're going very fast and moving towards Damascus side. What is the purpose and intent? The military aim and objective is not clear. So, but what I am trying to highlight is that Israel in all earnest, would also want to create a buffer zone so that the stakeholders or the main participants or the actors in Syria today, they do not spill over to Israel in any case. So who are the main participants or the actors? That we need to understand. The Assad regime, which has fallen, in any case, they are withdrawing. And who are in the Assad regime? There are three components which are in support at the cost of reputation. Let me just go over them. The internal resources of the security forces of the Syria, one. Number two, Iran. Number three, Russia. Number four, Hezbollah has been of great assistance to Syria, be it in terms of training or giving the military hardware, as also combat support to large an extent. And with this kind of a thing, that is the primary stakeholder. The second one is the Syrian Democratic Force. So what is the Syrian Democratic Force? Now, Syrian Democratic Force and the Syria Force, the regime, they are in cohort or they're in collaboration with each other. They had a détente a few years back. They understand each other. They have not gone in for each other's neck for quite some time. And they are supporting each other. Essentially, it comprises of Iraqi militias and the Kurdish militia. So what is the third component? The third component is the STS, which is a fallout of the Al-Qaeda. The leader is this gentleman who we call as Al-Janu, Abu Muhammad Al-Julani. He's the leader. 2003, during that time, when Abu Bakr was the leader of Al-Qaeda, he enjoyed the patronage and also the blessings of the Al-Qaeda leadership, but they fell apart. So he came to Syria. And after having come to Syria, he consolidated at Idlib and he started running a parallel government. So much so, he went to the extent of assuring US that US is not my target or his target. His target was essentially Assad. He said Assad is the one who is being targeted, not by him, but by the people of Syria, because he is denied the basic, the aspiration and the basic requirement of livelihood. So therefore, having declared there are no recorded any violent incident which has taken place wherein either US has attacked this gentleman STS's party or the STS party has attacked them. But more to that is that the Turkish army is in support, and the Turkish army is called as the SNA, it is called as Syrian National Army, which is supporting the STS. So both of them together have become an anti-government force by terms of the quantum of the resources, military hardware, and the offensive capability. They moved from Idlib to Aleppo. From Aleppo, they went to Hama to the Homs, and now Damascus is under threat. So in times ahead, there is a potential threat, this particular resource spilling over.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Stay with us. We're carrying more news now coming in this hour. A group of men at the Syrian embassy in Moscow have raised the opposition flag. Standing on the embassy balcony, the men were clapping and singing as they raised the green, red, black and white Syrian flag under falling snow. This, of course, comes as Kremlin is still mum on Bashar al-Assad's whereabouts. Interesting optics. Ambassador Bashwati Mukherjee from Moscow. The Syrian opposition flag being raised in Moscow amidst claps and cheers, even as Kremlin remains very quiet on Assad's whereabouts.
Yes, this is quite normal for embassies to switch sides. If you remember when Sheikh Hasina was overthrown, within 2 hours, Bangladeshi diplomats in Delhi were wearing black armbands and declaring solidarity with the regime that was the so-called interim regime which took over. So this is nothing surprising. What is of great concern is the actual situation of anarchy which is unfolding hour by hour in Damascus. There are apartment buildings which are presently being ransacked. I was looking at it on social media right now. It's not just Bashar al-Assad residence. There are a lot of residential blocks which are getting looted, which happens when law and order breaks down. So in the next 1 week, it will become clear whether those who claim to have taken Damascus by storm can hold on to that power and can bring about law and order, given the fact that those who are celebrating may not necessarily be supporting the rebels. Some are calling for free and fair elections throughout Syria. Others are saying that they would like to have a transition government that would oversee free and fair elections. Free and fair elections, if they are held, the rebels who have driven into Damascus so simply may not win those free and fair elections because they don't have popular support all over Syria. Moreover, the Syria is situated in a very strategic place where other neighboring countries would like to have some control. For instance, Israel has taken over the 50-year buffer zone which had been established under Camp David because the Syrian soldiers have withdrawn from their part of the buffer zone and Israeli forces have moved in and have taken over the demilitarized buffer zone between Israel and Syria. The Turks will not allow the Kurds to go beyond a certain extent because the Turks want to carve out independent Kurdistan out of territory from Iraq, from Syria, and from Turkey. That
Yes.
situation will evolve as they become more powerful in a interim power setup in Syria. Therefore, we will see a lot of jostling. In the meantime, as I said, there are two huge bases of the Russians in Syrian territory.
Okay.
We have to see how it pans out
Okay.
in the next week or
Let's
10
quickly, in fact, turn our focus to more news now coming in. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin has also responded. He stated that the speed of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's fall from power was surprising. He's emphasized that the international community expected to see a much more stiff resistance from Assad's forces. However, he's also noted that as this unfolds, there's a potential that elements in the area, such as ISIS, could try to take advantage of this opportunity and regain capability.
I think the entire international community was surprised to see that the opposition forces moved as quickly as they did, and I think everybody expected to see a much more stiff resistance from Assad's forces. So the speed at which that unfolded was surprising, I think, to most everybody in the international community. As this unfolds, there's a potential that elements in the area, such as ISIS, could try to take advantage of this opportunity and regain capability.
Okay, and let me in fact quickly join Major General Sudhakarji to the discussion at this point. Major General Sudhakarji, what can be read into this statement by Lloyd Austin and the fear and apprehensions that he has?
If I have my way of expressing, there is a huge potential of ISIS, re-emergence of ISIS. This is the biggest danger which US claimed to have broken and decimated the backbone in 2017. I all through and through, while in service and after my retirement, I have been saying more than breaking the backbone and decimating the ISIS, ISIS has got re-strengthened or reinforced in its ideology. They have broken up into smaller splinters in West Asia, in Northwest Africa and Central Asian side, as also the South Asian subcontinent. So my take is on the whole issue is that here the entire global order is in for a big challenge, and that challenge is going to be posed by not by Al-Qaeda or any other agency. It is the ISIS caliphate is going to re-emerge in a very conspicuous and prominent manner. Back to you, Uday.
All right, more news now coming in this hour. Israel has struck suspected chemical weapon sites and long-range rockets in Syria in order to prevent them from falling into the hands of hostile actors. But that's not all. It has also taken over the buffer zone at Golan Heights. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has stated that takeover of the buffer zone along its border with Syria was a limited and temporary step done for security reasons. Well, earlier the Israel PM Netanyahu had ordered the Israeli military to seize a demilitarized buffer zone on the border with Syria after the overthrowing of al-Assad in Damascus. Well, let's quickly listen in.
With regard to a threat on our security, mainly our communities in the Golan Heights, we took in some points, ruling territories near the border in order not to be surprised from October 7 in the Syrian border. I emphasize it is a very limited and temporary step we took from security reasons. With regard
Adit Kothari is back with us on the broadcast. Adit, what do you make of Israel's steps that have been taken since this development in Syria?
So I think from an Israeli standpoint, they're basically reinforcing their side of the border, and they're basically protecting any sort of hostile activities to sort of overflow into their territory. So they're only trying to create a sort of a protection from that perspective, which is why, the moment the Syrian forces sort of, disbanded their positions, the IDF was quick enough to move in and sort of place themselves in. In fact, so much so, I think there are positions well into the Syrian territory which have now been, which are now currently being manned by the IDF. I think Major Sudakarji pointed out 14 kilometers inside into Syria's border. The one thing that I do want to point across is about Abu Muhammad al-Jalali. Abu Muhammad al-Jalali was basically held as a prisoner by the United States Army for 5 years. And prior to that, he was basically trained by the Second Intifada. So, here's a man who has both Palestinian connections, and then, he was basically captured by the United States armed forces. How does this play out in the long run from a Middle Eastern politics is going to be the most interesting thing going forward. Because at the end of the day, the things why they have transpired so fast, so swiftly, is because Russia was incapable of providing any assistance to the Syrian forces. Russia is too embroiled in the Ukraine crisis, which is why they were not able to divert any of their resources towards Syria. And the rebels were basically able to sort of move in swiftly. Now the Israelis are trying to cut off everything from a Syrian perspective that links Iran into either Hezbollah regions or to the supply chains of Hamas. So what does this mean? Does this mean that the United States will move in and ensure that al-Jalali doesn't sort of bite the Iranian regime's plea to ensure that the supply lines between Hezbollah and Hamas and everything is intact? Or does he actually play foul to that? I think that's what is going to be the interesting thing, which is going to play out over the next couple of weeks. But I think, like Ambassador Mukherjee also pointed out, from a pure civilian perspective, here is a rebel government that has come in, or a rebel regime that is trying to create ruckus, which is trying to create
no, point taken. Point taken. All right, we'll have to wrap it up. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this broadcast.